Since the dawn of time, our media of entertainment has changed drastically, leaving the former staring off in the background feeling somewhat kind of useful. Just take the last century for an example. People have gone from radio to TV to recorded media like VHS and DVD to the home internet and the mobile internet with, small steps in between each of those major advancements. We've gone from vaudevillian radio acts all the way to socially involved gaming on the go. A few formats from each of these media eras do survive over the course of the history. The oldest one that comes to mind that has received a huge push from the mobile technology is the good old-fashioned radio talk show, now rebranded as podcasts. Everyone has a podcast, every hobby has one. Sim racing is no exception, but to my surprise, the longevity of these shows is dismal. Only a few come to mind that have lasted even over 2020 during the whole sim racing boost. But these are the 5 shows that I listen to, and you should too. What's up, everybody? It's Qwikstreet, and we are going through a list of the 5 sim racing version podcasts that I listen to. And you guys probably do listen to them as well. You guys should also check them out. And if I missed the show that you listen to, please make sure you put it in the comments down below so I can check them out. First up on my list here is a huge catch-all for just any sim racing news. This entry is not just a weekly podcast, but is full-on web-page collective of sim racing and esports material. We are talking about Traction.gg. I believe that is the correct way to say it is Traction and not Traction, like I've heard many times. I heard Traction used on one of their podcasts, so it must be right. But then again, we can all have this argument about how to actually say Fanatic or Fanatec, no matter how the CEO says it and everybody else does. Traction has a very well-designed website that works well on mobile devices and brings you the latest news, updates, reviews, track guides, esports broadcasts, etc. for any and all racing games. This is the only entry on the list that covers all games dedicated to racing on PC, console, and mobile. Yes, they will even talk Mario Kart. They have a very educated and talented racing staff, and they are just pumping out a lot of good content. The podcasts are weekly news/opinion pieces on one particular subject, and is usually about 30 minutes in length. You can catch the video version of their show on their webpage and their YouTube channel. Links for them and for all other shows I'm going to have posted down below here in my description. Before we mention the only other podcast out there that is not iRacing specific, let's highlight one of the newer shows that I have found and probably the youngest podcast on the list. 2 friends who got heavily addicted to iRacing during the 2020 lockdown. Like so many of us did decide to take on this passion for iRacing to the next level. Everyday iRacers is hosted by Rob and Josh, who actually met on iRacing and crafted a friendship/bond on and off the digital track. With only 28 episodes in the library, this duo is growing their friend circle through their Discord community, and fans of this short format friendly banter about iRacing and long analyzed discussions about gloves and footwear have gathered on their Discord and formed multiple endurance teams, all supporting the EDI program. Their community is also responsible for making the Friday night Huskenveld GT Challenge race go official every single week, so much so that they've been highlighted on iRacing as being responsible for helping out that Friday night time slot. Not too shabby for 2 Americans that are just everyday iRacers. Hopefully once the summer ends, we can get a little bit more regular content from this duo. Third on the list is a podcast that doesn't discuss iRacing at all. Why? Because it's Race Department. If you have ever played Assetto Corsa, ACC, R-Factor 2, Race Room, etc., anything other than iRacing, then you have heard of Race Department. This is the go-to spot for mods for any of the other sims, and I'm constantly on RD looking for new AC tracks to download and play with. Race Department is also behind one of the latest multiplayer event organizing community platforms. I'm not really sure what to call it, but we're just going to call it simracing.gp, and it is an amazing tool that is geared for communities to be able to host their own events, set up leagues, and it handles all these server setups for them. It's really cool. You can see here in the background, they have communities for Jimmy Broadbent and just tons of others. Anyways, back to the podcast. Our European hosts from many countries bring us news and rumors about all the other racing sims and hardware, and we'll, sometimes discuss football and other motorsports. The podcast also takes a very light and comical take between hosts Paul, Daniel, and David. I think I said that right. Fourth on our list is a kind of a hybrid between sim racing and real motorsports, and it is one of the latest podcasts that I just came across when I was doing a little bit of research, trying to look for more sim racing version podcasts, because seriously, there's not that many out there that I found. But I stumbled across this one. This one will be the more edgy and a manly podcast for iRacing, but they spend a lot of time talking about actual motorsports. And I'm not saying it's like locker room and potty talk, it is still far from that. But in terms of these 5 podcasts, this would be the morning zoo shock jock of them all. And speaking of which, their production value on their stingers, intros, and outros is just phenomenal. I thought I was actually listening to a highly produced radio talk show. The podcast is an equal split between talking about real motorsports, especially F1, and of course iRacing. The few episodes I binged through this week was very insightful and entertaining. The podcast is supported by their webpage, which ends up being a sim racing team and community called Mad Sim Racing. I've actually heard of these guys long before I went looking for this podcast. These guys run a lot of events that I've seen on social media, including the upcoming Operation Motorsport Benefit, which is a 2-driver, 4-hour endurance race at Watkins Glen. Links also down below, so please check out that event. And these guys run weekly leagues and have an endurance team ladder with feeder leagues, and it's looking very promising to anyone out there that wants to get more involved into an endurance race community. I'm going to look into these guys a little bit more, and hope they run a few late night things that I can jump into. And actually, I don't even know if I mentioned the name of this podcast. It's called Into the Apex. Last but not least is the podcast that I have been listening to every week since last November when I got into iRacing. This podcast is also probably the longest running weekly show in this hobby space. Nearing 300 episodes, we have to mention iRacers Lounge, a show where they talk about iRacing in a casual setting. This well-formatted 90-plus minute podcast covers all the topics, and they stick to the order week after week. They even get Evan Pasoko on from iRacing, who announces all the Coke races, and they do race recaps. My favorite portion is, of course, the hardware review, where every week they highlight anything new that comes out for this sport. They will even talk about DIY builds from YouTube or any other social media platforms that they endlessly scour week after week for the content for their show. They also record live every Thursday night over on their Facebook page and post all their show notes on their newly designed webpage. As an honorable mention, I'm also going to throw in their other sister podcast, I guess you could call it, called Aftermath, which is just a few of the hosts doing a more relaxed approach to podcasting, and usually have a weekly guest doing a more long version interview, guest host kind of format. I've only checked them out a few times, and I'm sure I'll still check them out. They're still subscribed over on my Spotify account. So those are the 5 plus an honorable mention, so you get a total of 6 that I listen to. Please comment down below if these shows end up being on your list, if you enjoy them. Am I missing any shows? Or did I bring any of these shows to your attention and now fully enjoy listening to? I really want to hear your comments down below. And our sim racing passion is probably the most competitive in terms of gaming, but when it comes to content creators like these that help shape and build our sport, we need to get behind them and support them. All these shows and others deserve credit for making sim racing what it is today and what it will be.